The word monster is a multifaceted phrase that can mean a horrifying abomination, a deviation from acceptable behavior, or a threatening force. Rarely is it so perfectly used to describe all three while referring not to just the main antagonist of a story, but nearly every other character at one point or another. That is both the brilliance and purposeful design of Naoki Urasawa's arguably unequaled work of art. Monster is a fusion of post-World War II Iron Curtain history and philosophical conundrums that jerks the mind through a labyrinth of death, mystery, and suspense throughout its dark story. We promised it was coming, and here it is. What was supposed to be the last video of Hellmouth this year, but this is Bonsai Pop, my friends. We do what we want, and it's all going down right now with Urasawa's Monster. If you don't know Naoki Urasawa, you've been living under a rock. The man's been drawing manga since he was just 4 years old and has won tons of awards as his career continued, but Monster is often pointed to as his big glow-up, the work that gained him international recognition and success. And let me tell you, my dudes, I get it. It's a work to rival the absolute best stories out there. It's a tense nail-biter that keeps you at the edge of your seat, uncertain and unsure of what's going on as you follow Dr. Kenzo Tenma from up-and-coming renowned neurosurgeon to escaped convict with the singular goal of ending a young man's life. So, if you've ever wondered if all lives are created equal, if killing a person to save another is the right thing to do, Monster will drag you through a world checkered with hedonistic and nihilistic characters fighting for control and towing back and forth the line of becoming a monster themselves. This is Monster. Let's get into it. My friends, it is that time of year again. The holidays will soon be upon us. I got my kotatsu all set up. Thanks to this video sponsor, Bokksu, I get to enjoy some delicious holiday treats from Hokkaido. Bokksu is a Japanese snack subscription service. There are treats in here that you can only get through Bokksu. Like, you're not even gonna find these if you go to Japan. But right now through December 31st, anybody who signs up for the subscription is automatically entered to win tickets to Japan. That's right, you can get free tickets to Japan just for signing up for Bokksu. So if you use our code Bonsai10, you can get somebody in your family or yourself an awesome holiday gift that lasts all year long and save up to $45. In this book, so I particularly liked the Yubari Melon Chocolate Langue de Chat, which I know that I at least pronounced the French on that wrong. I also love the Funwari Beijing Mochi Puffs that had Hokkaido milk. Those were delicious. And the Kinako and Black Sesame soft candy, which, like, I just cannot get enough of Black Sesame. Devin and I always have fun opening these boxes and going through them together and trying all the new stuff, and hopefully this year you and your loved ones can too. So make sure that you sign up before December 31st. I'm going to put some links in the description to the terms and conditions for this contest. Enter to win those tickets for Japan. Help out the channel. Use code Bonsai10 for 10% off. Let's get on with the show. All right, let's just get this out of the way. Monster is dense. There's a lot going on underneath each and every episode, and it's so complicated that there's often multi-episode gaps where Tenma, the main character, isn't even in the story until the plot finally gives you a connecting thread that ties it all together. Now, there will be spoilers in this video. However, the series is so long and complex that I'm going to need to leave a good amount out. So I doubt this video will ruin the enjoyment of a first-time viewing or reading, and definitely I recommend reading the manga, but you have been warned. Monster's story takes place historically from the 1930s all the way through 1999. I don't think we've covered a series where history takes such a critical role in the plot other than Rurouni Kenshin, but to understand Monster, you have to have at least a decent grasp on post-World War II West and East Germany, the Iron Curtain, Nazi experiments, the Communist bloc, the Czech secret police, the historical significance of areas like Prague and Dusseldorf. Honestly, just learn all of European 1900s history and you'll be alright. While Monster is still exceptional as a story and psychological thriller on its own, its impact is only increased by understanding the historical context and significance in which everything happens. So let's jump into what happens, and then we'll talk about the when and why. The year is 1986, Dusseldorf, Germany. The Berlin Wall stands erect, separating Western Federal Republic of Germany and the Soviet-occupied German Democratic Republic to the east. Dr. Kenzo Tenma is the big-brain Japanese immigrant neurosurgeon on the block. He is aiming for head of neurosurgery at Eisler Memorial Hospital and just saved the life of a famous opera singer. The man is a prodigy. He's capable of saving people that other doctors would be at a total loss with, and he is also engaged to the hospital director's daughter, Eva Heinemann. You could say that everything is going his way. He's got the job, the girl, the social standing, money, future, you name it. So obviously, it's all gonna get flushed down the toilet by the end of the first episode. horror stories, you know? You can't have the happily ever after on episode 1. This isn't a slice of life anime, okay? Almost immediately, Tenma's little bubble of perfection gets busted as a Turkish woman starts screaming at him in the hallway, blaming him for letting her husband die. Her husband had been admitted to the hospital before the opera singer, but was considered a lower priority, so Tenma was forced to transfer to the opera singer instead of this woman's husband, meaning that another doctor operated on her husband too late and he died. Immediately in episode 1, we get one of the primary themes for the entire show. Are all lives created equal? And Urasawa pulls no punches out of the gate. According to director Heinemann and Ava, the answer is no. Obviously, you save those who are more important to the hospital's standing. It's a business, not a charity. A no-name construction worker isn't as important as a famous opera singer. I mean, that's just common sense, right? Saving one of these lives gives the hospital prestige and recognition. The other does nothing to benefit their bottom line. It's all politics and money, and the director has a press conference where he takes all the credit for saving the opera singer's life. None of this, the business aspect, the weighing of one life over another, the politics and a job about saving lives, sits right with Tenma. This conflict within him is only pushed further during a nice dinner with his fiancée, and as Tenma tries to share and collect his thoughts on the matter, Ava outright says that lives are not created equal. He quite obviously disagrees and is extremely troubled by this idea. Then let's add on to this unrest a conversation with the director himself, where he cuts Tenma's funding for research despite it being nearly completed, and instead assigns Tenma to handle his own manuscript for his speech at the next European Medical Convention, yet again putting his own fame in politics over lives and research. And as you can guess, Tenma is understandably rattled by this. Cut to the police breaking down a door. Inside are two elderly people, both shot dead on the floor. A traumatized girl is standing in the corner over the bleeding corpse of her twin brother. Tenma is paged. The boy isn't dead, but he needs to be operated on immediately if they're going to save him. I mean, the kid was literally shot in the head, so yeah, they kind of need Tenma to operate on him because no one else in the hospital has the brain surgery skills to save him. And literally, as Tenma is about to cut into the kid's skull, he again gets called out of the operation room to perform on another patient, the mayor, who's getting flown in via helicopter. Immediately, Tenma is thrust back into the politics and needs of the hospital versus saving the life of a child who's literally already on the operating table and was there first. The mayor has promised the hospital a big funding increase, so the director wants to ensure that his life is saved. Tenma disobeys this order and operates on the kid instead, leaving the mayor in other doctors' hands. The child lives, and the mayor dies. And so does Tenma's career. Now, Tenma obviously did what he thought was morally right, and I bet you think that's morally right too, and I do as well. But the consequences for his choice are severe. In fact, they're far more severe than anyone could have guessed. Tenma's blamed by the other doctors for the mayor's death because they had to scramble to cover for him at the last minute. Tenma loses his shot at head of neurosurgery, and while he gets to keep his job, Director Heinemann won't give him a recommendation in the event he wants to transfer to another hospital. So in short, he's stuck at the same level he's at now, forever, without a chance of promotion or changing his employer, all because he wouldn't play ball on the director's terms. And to put icing on the cake, Ava breaks off their engagement. Tenma's life caves in around him, and in a moment of weakness and anger, he confesses all of this to the unconscious boy whose life he saved. In his anger, Tenma spitefully says that the director and the doctors backing the director's corruption would be better off dead. Well, careful what you wish for, bud. Now let's back up for a minute, right? Because these twins who were found by the police aren't just any old twins. It turns out that they are the Liebert twins, Anna and Johann Liebert, which may not mean anything to you, but their foster father was one of the former advisors of commerce for East Germany before he and his wife fled to the West, which is something extremely difficult and dangerous to do at the time. So those two bloody dead people were actually kind of politically important, aka their foster children being at the hospital is cause for a media circus. Of course, this means that the hospital can use the twins to gain public sympathy and attention, so against Tenma's advice, as the doctor assigned to the children's case, the other doctors bring Anna and Johann together for a photo op, causing a traumatic reaction in both of them. Tenma protests only to get kicked off of their case, so Tenma does what any reasonable doctor would do and gets white girl wasted. What he doesn't realize is that during his bender, Director Heinemann, Dr. Oppenheim, the chief of surgery, and Dr. Boyer, the new chief of neurosurgery, all mysteriously die via some poison candy found in Johann's hospital room. And who happens to have the most to gain from these three dying? Well,
It's Dr. Kenzo Tenma. Following the director's funeral, Tenma is interrogated by Inspector Longe of the BKA. While Longe sees Tenma as a suspect, there's no proof he killed anyone. Plus, he's got a nice "I was too drunk to kill anyone" alibi. Oh, and in the middle of all of this, both the twins completely disappear from the hospital without a trace. Now, despite this being all pretty awful, Tenma does unintentionally benefit substantially from the deaths of the doctors and directors. 9 years pass and Tenma is now chief of surgery. No Director Heinemann, no getting stuck without promotion. Tenma is happy with his work and shows exceptional care and kindness towards each and every one of his patients because of his philosophy that all lives are created equal. Despite his life changing so drastically from helping Johann, the fact that Johann survived cemented Tenma's quality of life philosophy as the way he treats all of his patients. The 9-year time skip also means the tearing down of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of Soviet Russia, the liberation of Germany and the communist bloc, as well as the peaceful dissolution of Czechoslovakia, now the Czech Republic and the Slovak Republic. Opening with Tenma caring for a patient named Mr. Jonkers, who has been at this crime scene of 4 murders of middle-aged couples over the last 2 years. Inspector Longe is back to question Jonkers about his connection to the murders. While he's initially silent from fear, Tenma manages to convince Jonkers to speak up about what he knows. A police guard is assigned to his room until he can give a testimony, but before that, the guard is poisoned with the same candy that killed the hospital director and doctors 9 years ago. Jonkers runs from the hospital for his life, and Tenma finds him at a nearby construction site with a young, blonde man who steps from the shadows and is revealed to be Johann Liebert. Jonkers frantically explains that this man hired him and his colleagues, all of whom are now dead. Johann greets Tenma like he knows him and thanks the doctor for saving his life 9 years ago, just before he executes Jonkers. Tenma begs him not to kill Jonkers, explaining that saving his life is what helped Tenma understand that all lives are created equal, and Johann merely laughs. Johann had killed the doctors and director 9 years ago because of that moment of anger Tenma had while talking to what he thought was an unconscious patient. It was sort of a thank you present for saving his life. After Johann executes Jonkers, he walks past Tenma, but not before telling him he was supposed to die that night, but Tenma resurrected him. In a way, Johann is essentially saying that all of these deaths are Tenma's fault. They're on his hands. He's responsible for Johann still being alive. Later on, Tenma explains everything that happened to Inspector Longe, but Longe still believes Tenma is the primary suspect, seeing as he's now the only witness to Jonkers' death, and eventually Tenma becomes a man on the run as all the evidence points to him. Tenma begins a life on the lam with the goal of finding Johann and stopping him from hurting anyone else. Now, believe it or not, all that explanation gets us is about 4 episodes into the anime, out of 74 episodes total, by the way, and of course only a few chapters into the manga. This shit is dense as hell, and if we wanted to go over every aspect of Monster, we would need multiple hour-plus episodes to do it. But if you're interested in that, please leave a like and a comment about who you specifically want us to go into. If we don't hear from you, we don't know what you want, and this is all that you're gonna get. Now, what I've already described is the bare essentials you need to know just to get the basics of the overarching plot. But before we go any further, I want to talk about these intro episodes. First off, Johann Liebert is described multiple times as a monster. Jonkers calls him one before he's killed. And throughout the entire anime, Johann is referred to as the monster, essentially whenever he's not referred to directly by name. While he's the namesake for the title of the anime, he's certainly not the only monster in the show, nor the only kind. He's not even the only one in the first few episodes. Johann is just kind of the plot glue. But I feel like one of the reasons Urasawa created Monster is to show the different types of ways that people might fall down a darker path than what we'd expect from them. Above all else, Monster is a story about a large variety of characters in a time and place where each one is realistically flawed, which brings them to do horrible things. Johann is 100% a bad person. Murder is bad, we all know that, we have laws against it, it's a no-brainer. However, it is always interesting to find out why somebody becomes bad. But before we do that, I'd like to draw your attention to Dr. Heinemann in contrast. Here's someone well-respected, a medical professional, and in a seat of power that literally decides the lives of others on a daily basis. In the short time we see Tenma under his leadership, multiple people die due to Heinemann unethically playing politics and money games. He quite obviously makes corrupt and unethical decisions that benefit himself and his hospital financially instead of decisions that are best for all of the patients in his care. He also surrounded himself with multiple doctors that to those principles for personal gain as well. Now, is that as bad as outright murder? If you make a man wait to be operated on because someone more affluent or famous comes in, are you not killing one man for personal gain? Are you not playing God? I think the most important aspect of these opening episodes is the fact that Monster is a title thrown around Johan as a murderer, yet a man who is essentially deciding who should live and die for his own desires is touted as a medical hero and is being asked to speak at the next European Medical Convention. It shows that we live in a world where death is a business, and it carries over as a central idea of the opening episodes. There's a lot of wealth in killing people. War is one hell of a profitable business. How do you think we got out of the Great Depression? Director Heinemann is just taking it a step further and choosing which lives are the most financially viable and saving people based on that criteria. His daughter Eva is almost as bad, and she certainly has her own downfall arc and redemption throughout the story, but breaking off her engagement to Tenma purely because he stuck to his beliefs and didn't do what her father wanted shows a complete lack of regard and respect for Tenma's ideals, and also points to the possibility that director Heinemann was merely using his daughter as a pawn to keep his best surgeon in check. Now, after Heinemann dies, Eva tries to start over with Tenma now that he's super successful, but he disregards her attempts. So while it's unclear exactly how she felt about Tenma during their engagement, it's extremely obvious that she's incredibly selfish and wants nothing more than money and power, at least initially. She makes decisions without regard to how they will affect others. Eva gets whatever she wants, and Tenma rejecting her actually breaks her psychologically. She becomes an alcoholic, continues to be obsessed with Tenma, but not to get back together with him, to get revenge on him for, quote, ruining her life. So much so that she even lies to the BKA, which is the German Federal Police, or Bundeskriminalamt, in order to make him seem even more guilty of the hospital murders. While Eva does eventually go through a slow redemption where she learns not to look down on others and actually learns how to care about someone besides herself, the vast majority of the show depicts her as a heartless human being. But that doesn't stop Monster from showing little moments of good within her as well, showing that she's not wholly bad and eventually could even be considered a good person. And Eva's really just one example of the complexity we see within so many characters throughout the series, which delves heavily into the human element. And it's the human element in the end which ruins all of Johan's plans. We have a military man who's killed whole families yet is taking care of the daughter of the woman he killed. There's a doctor operating without a license because she's the only one in her entire community who can. There's a freelance reporter who used to be a spy, yet he's trying to save orphans from the same horrific childhood he had. There's a children's book author who did brainwashing experiments on orphans, yet regrets his entire life and has been waiting for the consequences to catch up to him. Monster is not a show about good versus evil because there is really no such thing as true purity or true darkness. Everyone has darkness inside them, through their past, through trauma, through vices, anger, depression, you name it. No one is perfect. Bad people can do good things. Good people can do bad things. Monster is a story that highlights the vast differences, the large gray area in between of how fucked up any person on the street could be. And it's these differences and how these characters are constantly struggling between their good and bad intentions that creates such a real and impactful tension within the series. Now, one of the primary questions asked right from the beginning is that if given the chance, will Tenma kill Johan? Tenma far and away seems like the most purely good character. He's a doctor, he's a healer, a brilliant surgeon, and he believes that all lives are worth saving. How do you square that with a 74-episode story about the same man hunting a person with the intent of killing them? Can a man who's taken the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm and save countless lives throw it all away to kill someone? Is it throwing it all away? How much death is okay for a better future? Is it good if some people die? Tenma is a man who's slowly getting his own monster drawn out of him throughout the story, and the question really is, will Tenma give in to that darkness and kill Johan, or will his good side keep him in check? It feels a lot like Rock in Black Lagoon. He's sitting on the edge of the twilight, one foot in the light, one in the dark, and walking this tightrope of good and evil. All the while, he learns of the evil committed behind the Iron Curtain by people in the Communist Party while Germany was occupied by Soviet Russia, or those in Czechoslovakia under Russian rule. So which way will Tenma fall, and why? This is where we get into the philosophical quandaries in the show. If you recall right at the beginning of this video, I said Monster will make you ask, is killing one person to save others the right thing to do? It is a philosophical conundrum for sure, but it's also one of the most famous thought experiments of all time. Have you ever heard of the trolley problem? Basically, you got a trolley going down a path that splits into two. In front of the trolley are a group of people that'll get run over if the trolley continues its course, and on the second set of tracks, there's a person who will get run over if the tracks are switched. You are at the lever that switches the track. tracks. So what do? If you do nothing, a bunch of people die, but if you switch the track, you're directly responsible for that single person dying, at least through your actions. So what is the right answer? Are you responsible if you do nothing, though you had the power to save or condemn? Urasawa literally made a murder mystery trolley problem with Kenzo Tenma as the man on the lever and then upped the tension 100%. First, there's the choice of operating on Johan or the mayor. That's your classic trolley problem. Then after that, you have a somewhat twisted version of the same idea. Do you go after Johan to kill him, and in doing so, save the lives of who knows how many others? However, Urasawa added a bit of a twist to the second trolley problem here. Like I mentioned earlier, Johan tells Tenma that he resurrected him. So it's not just an innocent bystander at the lever anymore. It's more like Tenma is the trolley conductor. He feels responsible that the trolley is speeding towards people to kill them in the first place. Also, in this analogy, Johan is a nihilistic runaway trolley, and I find that mental image kind of funny, but it's a philosophical argument, right? I think most people would pretty quickly say, well, you switch the track to save the most people. And sure, logically, I agree with you, but you gotta dig a bit deeper than that. First off, we gotta think about responsibility. As the bystander in front of the switch, what is my responsibility? If I do nothing, am I responsible for all of these people dying? The outcome would be the same if I wasn't there. So am I responsible for their deaths because I could have prevented it but didn't? And on the reverse side, if I do pull the switch to save the group of people, am I responsible for the death of the one person? And why are all these people on railroad tracks? But is that murder? My action or inaction alone is what killed them. So is it possible for me to say I'm not responsible for it? Then you have to consider it in terms of the anime. I think the majority of people would say that Tenma is not responsible for the killings Johan commits. So it's not his responsibility to track Johan down. Doctors aren't responsible for the actions their patients take outside of their care, right? And I'd say that that's pretty reasonable. Yet in comparison to the trolley problem, that's essentially saying that it's not the responsibility of the switch holder to save the group. And that somehow feels wrong, right? What's the difference between the two? Also, Tenma is the only person who knows for a fact that Johan is responsible for his crimes. So does that lend more responsibility to the information holder? Is it that someone else is doing the killing so they're responsible, therefore Tenma isn't? But the trolley originally wasn't set in motion by the person on the switch either. So in the end, we have a difference in feeling of what is the right thing to do between two very similar scenarios. Keep that in mind as we keep going and see if you can figure out why it feels like it's not Tenma's responsibility to save people from Johan, but something he puts on himself. Well, in the trolley problem, it does feel like it's the responsibility of the switch operator. Philosophy's nuts, man. Okay, so in order to get to the main points, I'm going to try and lightning round summarize most of the story, like in a minute, so this video doesn't kill me and you. Ready? Johan's sister Anna gets readopted, but now she's named Nina Fortner because trauma makes memory go bad. Johan's a dick and kills her foster parents, so she starts to remember stuff. Now she wants to kill Johan too. Tenma learns how to shoot guns, makes an Asian girl smile. Tenma learns about 511 Kinderheim, Johan's orphanage that was actually a psychological reconstruction project. Tenma learns that a neo-Nazi organization is looking for Nina so they can lure Johan to them and make him Hitler 2.0. Ava Heinemann is nearly killed by a hit team because she's the only other person who heard Johan kill Junkers back in episode 4. Tenma buys a big boy gun for sniping Johan, but instead saves people from a burning building that Johan caught on fire just to watch people in mayhem. Longe thinks Tenma started the fire, but much like Billy Joel, he didn't start the fire, and tons of people are witnesses to a Japanese man helping save people. Longe doesn't bother to listen to evidence. He's like L trying to prove Kira is right, except he's totally wrong. Everybody ends up in Prague, where a tape recording of young Johan exists. Johan overwrites it before anybody can use it to prove his existence. Nina's brain starts going berserk and she starts to remember stuff while in Prague. Tenma is trying to find Franz Bonaparte there, who used to work for the Czech secret police. Bonaparte is responsible for the twins being born. Their parents getting together was a government experiment to produce the perfect children. Then he also led the 511 Kinderheim orphanage experiments. He's the mystery man behind Johan's upbringing, which is largely blamed for his sociopathy. Then everyone ends up in Ruinheim, which is a small town Franz Bonaparte lives in, except his name is actually Klaus Popp. He's an old man who regrets his entire life now. Grimmer, who is also in 511 Kinderheim, tells Klaus Popp he can't die because he has to answer for his crimes. Popp dies anyway. Johan starts killing the entire town, using fear, torture, and psychological manipulation as a final act to erase his entire past, get revenge for the treatment his mother went through, and commit the perfect suicide. At gunpoint with Tenma, Johan points to his head, basically giving Tenma permission to shoot him and encouraging it, essentially mocking Tenma's all lives are created equal ideals. A gun goes off, but it's not Tenma's, it's the town's drunk. Johan isn't dead though, he's just shot through the head but is still alive like a fucking boss. Tenma does surgery, but whether he saves Johan or not is based on the viewer's perspective. Johan is either alive and in a coma, alive and woke up from a coma and escaped the hospital, or dead, depending on how you look at the ending. Tenma joins Doctors Without Borders after all charges on him are cleared. Now, that probably sounds like an actual clusterfuck, and honestly it kind of is, but all of these events happen with the intention of finding out where Johan is, why he became the person he is, and on Johan's end, to destroy any evidence he ever existed. That's the overarching goal Johan has, and that is his perfect suicide, the total erasure of his memory from existence. Now there's side bits to his plans, like making Tenma face his equal life beliefs and seeing if he'll stick to it, or sowing discord to display how easily humans can turn into monsters once their bubble of safety is broken. But everything Johan does revolves around essentially the opposite idea of Tenma. If Tenma says all lives are equally important, that means that each and every life is meaningful. Johan aims to prove that all lives are meaningless and only equal in death, which is why he eventually plans this perfect suicide. By destroying all evidence of himself, Johan is basically trying to prove with his own being that life is meaningless, because the world would be untouched by him. At least, that's kind of how I see it. I also mentioned some really interesting things in the fast segment, and didn't mention some really interesting characters. Like 8,000 of them, with full fleshed out and realized backstories. I also read the entire manga in preparation for this video, and man, it was amazing. But as always, I did some diving into history for you as well, and what I found is pretty crazy. Now, again, the entirety of Monster is wrapped up in the politics and sociology of Germany and Eastern Europe for the end of World War II all the way through the 90s. That's a lot of history, and I'm not going to point for point detail that because we'd be here for 2 days, but know that the question of nature versus nurture is still largely debated amongst psychologists as well as armchair philosophers like yours truly, and frankly, Monster has a whole lot to do with the idea of nature versus nurture, and the socio-political atmosphere of a divided Germany and the war between capitalistic democratic ideals and communist Soviet Russia created turbulence the likes of which we'd never seen before. So while the Cold War saw little action in terms of armed conflict, behind the scenes, the civilians on both sides paid the price. Kinderheim 511 sounds like science fiction, right? A school for children that was secretly a communist brainwashing outfit to create the perfect human is too evil to imagine existing. However, it's not too far from reality, and may in fact be more real than one might imagine. And it wasn't just Russia doing these kinds of human experiments. Nazi Germany participated heavily in eugenics, which is the process of cleansing the gene pool of quote-unquote inferior people, couple the most genetically quote-unquote superior people to produce the best offspring, and culling those with mental or physical handicaps in death camps. Now, this isn't the first or last widespread use of eugenics. I mean, hell, Sparta is famous for its eugenics practices of throwing babies that weren't up to snuff off a cliff into the dead baby pit. And Japan isn't guilt-free either. They didn't outlaw compulsory sterilization of the disabled until 1996. And if you thought America was safe and sound on the moral high ground, well, I don't know where your head's been at, but it smells like shit. We had one of the strictest eugenics policies through Virginia's Racial Integrity Act of 1924, outlawing marriages between whites and free people of color. It wasn't revised until the 1960s and was put in place to keep the white race pure. Yikes. Now, Johan and his sister are the product of forced eugenics, and then brainwashing too. Now, I know what you're thinking, right? Brainwashing, that's science fiction. Well, think again. And most of us don't have to look far to find it. In the United States, our very own CIA came up with Project MK Ultra in 1953 and didn't end its trials until the mid-70s. MK Ultra was an illegal human experimentation project which, through the use of drugs, freezing temperatures, and deadly electric shocks, psychologically and physically tortured American and Canadian citizens until they completely broke. And yes, it was in the name of national security and science. They used over 80 institutions, including colleges, universities, hospitals, prisons, and pharmaceutical companies. Of course, on the other side of the globe, Russia was doing very similar, if not the same exact things. And just so you know, survivors of this torture, of this experiment done by our own government and many others, spent the rest of their lives literally unable to control pissing themselves. Some had complete amnesia, and others, for instance, forgot their parents and believed their torturers to be their parents. The rest died. These experiments, of course, were conducted in part by Nazi scientists that were grabbed up on both sides of the conflict. And speaking of Nazis, let's talk about those people who wanted to use Johann to become the next Hitler, neo-Nazis.
So you think white people are under siege?
Absolutely.
We're facing extinction.
What type of people are they?
People from all walks of life. People from truck drivers to lawyers, to retirees, to former military, and those that are currently serving.
He is adamant his is a non-violent organisation.
And I think to myself, what the fuck?
Now, Personally, this is just my opinion, there's nothing more disgusting to me than a neo-Nazi, and they are actually a major problem right now, and not just in America. It is a global problem, but is also a major issue in Germany, where it is ironically illegal to show Nazi symbolism or deny the Holocaust. National Socialism, which really has nothing to do with actual socialism, Nazism or Hitlerism, is a political movement created out of fear by white Western chauvinists. Basically, people who believe that the Western world is superior, as well as the quote-unquote white race. Their platform exists through anti-Semitism, ultranationalism, racism, xenophobia, ableism, homophobia, anti-Romaniism, anti-communism, anti-Slavic, and creating a Fourth Reich. Simply put, they like being in power, they like being the majority, and are scared of what will happen when they aren't. Mostly because they're pieces of shit who deserve whatever is coming to them. Mostly because they make a lot of enemies trying to stay in power through the use of violence, slavery, hate, rape, and even murder or mass murder, sometimes genocide when they can get away with it. Now in Monster, this group of people see Johann as the perfect human. He's tall, male, Aryan, psychologically manipulative, attractive, and completely devoid of morals or emotions. The perfect person to lead the Fourth Reich and reinstate the death camps and eugenic projects, as well as sequester all the wealth and power to the white chauvinists, etc., etc. These people are terrified of globalization, which at this point has probably reached event horizon, and neo-Nazis have become an out-of-date, uncivilized, bigoted, domestic terrorist outfit that only becomes a threat if they get a politician into power. Anyway, the last thing to mention is the Czechoslovakian Secret Police, or STB, which has way less syllables, so we'll go with that. This was a communist intelligence agency in the Socialist Republic of Czechoslovakia, which no longer exists as a national entity. They were about as bad as any secret police, using torture, including the use of psychoactive drugs, blackmail, kidnapping to obtain forced confessions from anyone, including political prisoners or anti-communist defectors bound for free West Germany. And wow, that kind of sounds like the CIA. This force was disbanded in 1990, but in Monster, they're seen to continue on as a shadow organization, and honestly, I think I've given you enough real-world history within these past couple minutes here for you to understand that that could easily be true. It is, as of yet, unproven though. But now that we're all on the same page, to me, the entire story breaks down into a question of humanity itself. What makes us human? What makes us who we are? Is our identity now the same as it will be 10 years from now, or 10 years in the past? Do our lives matter equally? Is there a difference between a human and a monster, and where is the line? Is the death of one worth the lives of many? Is choosing that death humane? What makes killing another person a morally good cause? The one part of Monster that draws the most criticism is the ending, right? Tenma never has to choose whether or not to shoot Johann because someone else does it instead. So people often feel like they're robbed of the answer to the series-long trolley problem. But personally, I think the ending makes a lot of sense. First of all, there's a human element where you can't just expect someone to do something because that's the way that the story seems to be heading. Humans are notoriously unpredictable. Second, Tenma once again decides to try and save Johann's life, and I think that's all the answer we really need. Urasawa is saying that even now, Tenma doesn't have the right to kill another person, even if that person is quote-unquote evil. The man who does shoot Johann is doing so not out of revenge, not because the person he's shooting is a monster and a murderer, not because there's a sense of responsibility to kill Johann, but simply to protect his son. And that's a huge difference in the reasoning to shoot somebody. Protection, not correction. And let's not forget that this man is an abusive father and a monster of a person, but his most monstrous act was committed out of love and a desire to protect his son. How's that for a twisty? Monster is a series that makes each and every viewer look inward at their own inclination towards revenge, responsibility, empathy, and compassion. It's a world filled with flawed characters that hit on an emotional level because of their realistic nature and their dualistic personalities. We all have the capacity to grow monsters inside of us. We aren't all good or all bad. Much like yin and yang, there are opposing forces in life, but this story is striving to show the difference between living life with hunger versus finding fulfillment in who we are. Johann was never happy with who he was. Not only did he never have a true identity, but he worked to erase what he did have. With his twin sister in the picture, it's hard to tell whether Johann was just bad or if he was turned bad through the abuse that was put upon him as a child. Now, Tenma's identity is fulfilled by the end. He chooses to try and save Johann's life yet again, cementing who he is to himself. He's not a murderer, he's a healer. To him, all lives are created equally, even Johann's. Accepting yourself means being happy with your good and your bad side, with your strengths and more importantly, your weaknesses. It means finding happiness in knowing yourself and being honest with yourself, and Johann was not able to do that. Maybe he never tried, maybe he was never given a chance. But either way, it's honestly a really difficult thing to do. And he definitely didn't have the upbringing to set him on the right path. But for the rest of us, internal acceptance is something to strive for, because once you find it, you stop looking for it from the rest of the world. In the end, Monster is about Tenma finding inner peace in who he is and thriving after understanding himself. And that's the true takeaway of Monster. We're all people, we're all different, we all have faults and flaws and things we excel at and beliefs we follow and different circumstances that we grow up with depending on where and when we are. And we all go through challenges that test whether or not we are who we think we are. Don't doubt yourself because of who you're supposed to be. Believe in who you are. And fuck the Nazis.
Hi everybody, this is Mike. Thank you so much for watching the entire video. Oh my god. I'd like to thank Bokksu once again for sponsoring this video, guys. Don't forget to check them out in the description. Use code Bonsai10 for 10% off. And of course, enter to win tickets to Japan. All of that, again, in the description. Shout out to our high tier patron, Karis, and our lucky patron of the week, GT Gamer, and all of our patrons for all of their support. Thank you guys so much. We wouldn't be able to do this without you. Google Bonsai Pop for all our social media. My name's Mike. This was Monster. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.